Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Needy No More, the podcast dedicated to healing the anxious attachment style. I'm your host, anxious attachment style coach and author, Chris Ratcliffe. I've helped thousands of people across 6 continents to end the cycle of anxious attachment through my books, workshops, digital downloads, and coaching program. I'm excited to carry on that mission here on the podcast, sharing tools and techniques, principles and practices for you to explore on your journey to growing more secure. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm excited to dive into today's topic. It's something different that I haven't covered yet, and that is what a secure relationship actually looks like. As many of us know from experience, because we struggle with anxious attachment, we often haven't had a whole lot of healthy models for secure relating in our lives. Without those examples of what secure attachment and secure relationships actually look like, we might unconsciously push away the very intimacy and connection that we crave. So today we're going to do something very interesting, which is to unpack what these kinds of relationships actually look like. One of the very first things that I have my coaching clients do in the program is an exercise that I call secure role models. And in this exercise, the client identifies a secure couple in their life. Now, even hearing that might make you struggle to think of a secure example or relationship in your own life. That is not uncommon. It happens all the time. One of the most common messages I receive from my clients is when they do this exercise, which is, Chris, I can't think of a healthy couple, a relationship in my life that I want to model after. That is not a coincidence. For many of us as anxious attachers, we equate secure attachment or healthy relationships with perfection. This is part of the problem. So what we're going to do today and what the secure role models exercise actually helps my clients to do is to get under the hood and see what this actually looks like. So we're not just talking philosophically or conceptually about what a healthy relationship is. We're actually getting up close and personal into the nitty-gritty of how couples actually make it work between the two of them. What you might find is there's a lot of messiness, there's a lot of imperfection, there's a good amount of conflict and disagreement, but these couples have found a way of navigating their relationship that works for them. Now, I went back through 5 years of these exercises that my clients have shared with me. And I found some commonalities, some patterns among the qualitative data. So we're going to do 3 things today. And the first is to walk through those qualitative insights, through the patterns that emerged from analyzing these client exercises and really examine how couples make their relationship secure and build that security. From there, the second thing we'll do is to extrapolate some secure relational principles. So we'll start by getting that qualitative data, then we'll back into some of the principles and concepts, and then we'll close with an audit that you can do if you're in a relationship, or when you get into your next relationship, that can indicate the level or degree of secure relating or attaching. Very interesting stuff ahead. Let's start with the evidence. Here's what secure couples actually do in practice. They ask for consent before hard conversations. They don't force any kind of emotional processing or discussions. One person in the dataset described it this way. When she wants to talk about something important and he wants to process or decompress first, she journals everything and then they come together to share the topic. The time is usually decided beforehand with that question. Do you have the space to talk about something big? Another couple texts each other. Hey, I want to talk about X later. Not urgent, but when you have the space. This actually gives the other person time to mentally prepare, instead of feeling ambushed. This was something that came up multiple times from this exercise. People asking for consent and alerting their partner before having a big discussion or talking about something that felt perhaps heavy or consequential. The next thing that came up in the data is healthy partners slow down instead of escalating. They journal before they talk. They write emails and then edit them. One couple described this practice. At times, we write a letter or email to each other, sit with what we said, edit it, and then share it with one another. It helps us consider if what we're saying is worth it or if it's just something charged in the moment. It gives us space to sit on it. We write everything down, get the feelings out, and don't send it until it feels right, ready, correct. It also helps with words not getting misconstrued. We did this a lot in the beginning of the relationship. Another couple will take car rides to discuss serious topics because it feels less confrontational. They said, "We found that being in the car driving somewhere helps us communicate better because we both focus on the conversation, but also can't get too aggravated. It's like a good balanced environment for us." So there's a lot of intentionality here when it comes to communication, whether that's asking beforehand if they're in the right space, or slowing down to process through writing or in a different environment. The third thing that came up when analyzing the data from this exercise is these couples, secure couples, don't yell or name call. This was almost universal across all of the interviews. There was no verbal aggression, no public humiliation. One person said they do not yell when they disagree, but rather maturely discuss it. They do not blame. They give each other the benefit of the doubt. Another shared, "I used to pick fights and cause conflict because that's what I grew up with. That was what I knew. But because he is securely attached, I was able to eventually settle out of that and slowly realize that life didn't have to be this way. My relationship didn't have to be up and down and all around like that." So there's a good amount of goodwill here, of positive affection, even in the midst of conflict or disagreement. There's respect. That brings us to the next one. I actually use this word. They assume goodwill. They assume positive intent. Instead of saying things like, "Why would you do that?" It's, "Help me understand what happened." There's an inclusiveness. There's a desire to understand one another. One person even said, they give each other the benefit of the doubt. They speak from their feelings and use I statements. This is a big one that I have my clients do as well. I statements over you statements. You statements can feel like you're attacking someone or criticizing them or just putting all the focus on them instead of talking about your own emotional experience. Another described it this way. When conflict comes up, I ask myself, does this make sense or am I getting triggered? Is there some underlying wound within myself? There's a part of me that wants to avoid conflict, doesn't want to hear what she's saying. I spend some time with myself. Again, this is another note about processing and intentionality, but there's usually an assumption that the partner did not intend any kind of maliciousness or that they had any malintent. Next, they stay on the same team. This is a big one. When conflict comes up in a relationship, many folks will look at their partner as the threat or the enemy or the villain, the person in the wrong. But these couples, the ones who were analyzed as a part of this exercise, they remind each other consistently that it's us against the issue. They actually soothe spirals. They calm chaos. They don't embarrass each other in front of other people. They also don't avoid the issue, but they recognize that together they can make a lot more progress than fighting against one another. One person shared, if we're out to brunch and one of them is stressed, the other will very quickly pick up on it and talk them down before they spiral. But they don't downplay what caused the frustration. They just talk them through it, give them space to calm down, whatever they might need. It's really awesome to watch. And this is one of my clients describing from a third-person perspective what this dynamic actually looks like in practice. Ooh, this next one is big. They don't keep score. Multiple couples through this exercise mentioned this explicitly. Their needs are met without tracking who did more than the other. One person said they aren't super transactional or keeping score. They keep each other mentally stimulated and engaged and make sure they show up for each other if the other person is struggling. Brené Brown herself, the queen of emotions and shame research and vulnerability, she actually says that 50-50 is bull, and I agree. it's never going to be 50-50. Someone's usually giving a little bit more, or at times a lot more, than the other person. But there needs to be that reciprocity. If one person's doing that, they can't be doing it all the time. The healthy couples here, they didn't keep track of this because they knew that it would even out over time. They weren't tallying who did what when and marking it down in a book. They just keep a mental note and they consider what the other person is doing for them. Next, they protect independence. This came up a lot through the data. Independence is massively important for healthy, secure relationships. They have friends outside of the relationship. They spend time alone or in solitude. They have separate interests and hobbies and passions and goals. They recognize that security is not possession. They can let go and let the other person have some space. Let there be breathability. One person said, they appreciate that they are each independent people with things that give them joy outside of the relationship. They feel this makes them a better partner when they come back to the relationship. It's true. You're sharpening skills elsewhere and feeling more fulfilled in your life when you do this. Another shared, one person needs space to enjoy his time alone while his partner would rather spend time at home. Even though the two have different styles and functioning independently, they're able to communicate their needs, boundaries, and accept what their partner is unable to provide them and find other resources to fill that void. That independence, that space, that autonomy helps with that kind of emotional diversification, which we've talked about on the show before. Oh, I love this one. They move on from small conflicts quickly. They don't stay mad about minor issues. They don't make every disagreement existential or about the future of the relationship. One couple said, communicating every feeling and emotion is very helpful, but not always the easiest. What has helped us the most is to move on quickly, not staying mad for a long time. This is pertaining to simple things. Another described, sometimes you win, but you still lose. We're better at dropping something when we don't like where something is going. We've realized that hitting the pause button is something that we can do. It feels like we're letting something hang, but it's good because it helps us avoid getting into conversations that will undermine our connection. So there's not a lot of harboring of resentment. Again, this goes back to keeping score because they're not tallying up the small stuff and letting that add up to be something bigger. They address it head on, they do so quickly, but they move through the experience of conflict pretty quickly. Next, they take responsibility for their triggers. Several people in the data mentioned therapy, self-reflection, pausing when activated, noticing resentment early, and taking time to process. One person shared, when there's an emotional reaction out of proportion to what we're talking about, we figure out a way to move beyond that and process it. We're both still individuals on a journey of healing ourselves. We make space for ourselves. So they're each taking responsibility for what activates their wounds, for what is triggering for them. This also hits at another important point, which is they don't expect their partner to be responsible for their feelings, and they have other environments in which they're able to process those feelings. Ooh, I love this one. They have mental lists of what the other person needs. This was really a beautiful detail that emerged from analyzing this set of exercises. One couple described it this way. When one of them isn't happy, they have lists for each other mentally in their heads on what the other needs, and they ask lovingly, hey, do you need XYZ? Another said, both partners know to have lists in their head of what the other wants to receive in terms of love language. They're sensitive to each other's moods. I love this because it's really considering what the other person has shown you over the course of the relationship that makes them feel appreciated and understood. And that's kind of one of the beautiful parts of being in a long-term relationship. Even non-romantically, even platonically, having people in your life that recognize he prefers this over this, that helps tremendously. Keeping tabs of this, not keeping score, but keeping tabs of what helps the other person is tremendously thoughtful and a huge sign of secure relating. All right, this last one might seem basic, but bear with me because it's super important. They genuinely like each other. These couples were very playful and affectionate. They had inside jokes. They enjoyed doing simple things together. They genuinely appreciated the presence of the other person in their life. They recognized that security isn't just stability, it's warmth, it's comfort, it's ease. One person said they laugh at the inconveniences and moments of stress because they are on the adventure together. I love that. They love similar things, and it allows them to explore their passions and interests together. Another shared, there is mutual respect and affection. They seem at ease and relaxed with each other. I didn't detect much anxiety. Now, here's an interesting plot twist. A few of these secure role models still had avoidant patterns. Some ignored issues until they were forced to address them, and some needed therapy early on. One couple even went through infidelity and reconciliation. It took months of processing, accountability, and rebuilding trust. So what I want to instill here or drive home to everyone watching and listening is that secure couples are not perfect. The lesson that this demonstrates is that secure couples are committed to repair and responsibility. And that means even when their patterns aren't ideal or positive for that matter. One person put it perfectly. The first 5 years of their marriage was extremely tough. They didn't know each other long before they got married. But once they decided that divorce was off the table, they began to put in the work. That's when they felt secure enough to genuinely say what they were feeling, even if they knew it would upset the other person, because they each knew the other person wasn't going anywhere. But they also knew they needed to express their feelings in a loving way, not a mean or cruel one. So there you have it. That's how 5 years worth of secure couples that have been identified by the clients that I have worked with have actually made their relationship secure and built secure attaching and relating with one another. This is the magic, so definitely pay attention. But I want to actually distill this down into concepts that are easy to understand and to take away. Things that really cut through some of the qualitative examples I just provided that help you to understand conceptually what actually makes someone secure in terms of relating as a couple. The very first principle that presented itself when I was analyzing everything was a sense of trust. Now, when I talk to clients about trusting, I always tell them that there are 2 components to pay attention to. The first is trust that is just freely given. It's a general assumption that the other person means well. This is what it means to give someone the benefit of the doubt. And trusting them until they prove you otherwise is very important. The second element of trust is earned. So you have freely given, there's kind of goodwill, benefit of the doubt, okay, until you prove otherwise. I'm going to assume innocence until proven guilty. And then this part is earned. So through someone's words and actions aligning over time, you build trust. In general, this feels like not bracing for betrayal, not being blindly optimistic, but not constantly monitoring what the other person is doing. There's a reliability here that's really important to underscore. Reliability, consistency, they build trust. But there's also an element of this where we have to give them trust and learn to allow ourselves to trust other people. Many of us have been hurt a lot, so it can be hard to do this, but we have to open up our heart once more. Vulnerability is the cost of connection. It's the price we have to pay to put ourselves out there and risk our heart once again. Okay, the second concept or principle that emerged was emotional safety, the ability to be yourself fully, to express your full truth. Not every single feeling, not every single infraction or thing that bothered or upset you. There's a lot of grace that you can see in the examples that we already went through and covered today. But generally, they understood, I can say this and we'll still be okay. There's no avoiding of hard topics, but the conditions exist where the hard topics can actually be heard. Number 3, it's going to seem basic, but this definitely presented itself as a commonality, and that is respect. There's generally a lot of admiration and reverence in these kinds of relationships. Respect is the minimum. It is the floor or foundation. without it there, nothing else can be built on top of it. These couples dignify their space, their shared space together in their relationship. And it's beautiful to witness. Number 4, reciprocity. Effort flows both ways. Again, it's never 50-50, but long-term, it feels relatively balanced. You're not the only one initiating, and many of us as anxious attachers have done this. You're not the only one repairing or planning or apologizing or taking accountability or pursuing connection. Secure reciprocity feels like, I'm not alone in this. While the contribution is going to look different from each person and will never be identical, it means that both of you feel the other person is invested. Number 5, comprehension. I write about this in Needy No More, the book, but communication without comprehension is just words. There needs to be a shared understanding, and this is something that emerged again and again looking at the data from these exercises. There's a sense of feeling understood, again, that sense of safety. And for many of these couples, they actually leave difficult, challenging, emotional, or hard conversations feeling closer, not further apart. As we already kind of hinted at earlier, this isn't about someone being right or there being a winner. This is about trying to understand one another's realities, trying to understand one another's wounds and triggers and what activates each of you. There's this learning of each other that is so beautiful and potent, and something to take away from this. This comes up again and again and again. Repair is number 6. Conflict in a relationship is inevitable. Disagreements are going to happen at some point or another. And that's because you're two very different people coming together and trying to make a life, make a shared space. That's what a relationship is. But secure couples focus on repair. They don't get it right every time. There's always rupture. But they come back together, they take accountability, they work through it, they talk about it, they learn from these experiences. Again, this is not about being perfect. It's about being willing to come back to the table and work through things together as a team. Number 7 might be my favorite, and that is consideration. It's been said that consideration is the highest form of love, and I tend to agree. This was actually a universal thread that ran throughout every other concept. Knowing the impact of your words or actions, understanding what will land as supportive versus critical or pressuring. There's an intentionality in secure relationships that really hits at the point of consideration. Each one is taking into account what makes the other feel supported and appreciated and loved and cared for. And that is such a beautiful thing. That leads us to number 8, which is complementarity. Relationships aren't about sharing everything in common. That is not realistic at all, or a healthy expectation to have of a partner. You're not going to share everything. And in fact, complementarity is way more important than compatibility. This is about how you shore each other up where you might be weak, or how you balance each other out. Differences keep each of you on your toes. Complementarity means that these differences actually add a richness, not a friction, to the dynamic. Number 9 is independence. There's a lot of space and autonomy in these kinds of secure connections. Secure couples are not enmeshed or codependent. There is a sense of independence that helps them to be interdependent. And in fact, you can't spell interdependent without independent. They each have their own friends, their own hobbies, alone time. And to these couples, distance doesn't equal danger. I really want to share this one quote that I think really hits home at this. I don't need him. I want him. We're choosing to be here, fully standing, fully capable, and choosing to be in this relationship together. At first, that made me feel wildly insecure. But then embracing it made me feel very empowered. This isn't about fusing your life with someone else's. This is about two relatively whole people choosing one another and continuing to make that choice. Last but certainly not least, number 10 is growth. Both partners are willing to look at themselves and ask, What's mine here? Am I triggered? Is this about my past? Is this about my wounds? Is this about my childhood, my previous relationships? Big point here. A sense of security in a relationship requires accountability. Multiple people mentioned therapy, both individually and as a couple. Many people mentioned journaling and meditating, having self-care and or nervous system regulation practices, growing individually as a person and together as a team is essential for secure relating. All right, that leads us to the third and final part of today's episode, which is a quick 10-question self-audit that I put together that can help you to evaluate the extent of security or the level of healthiness that is present in your current and or future relationship. These actually tie back to the concepts that we just addressed. So this will be a good refresher or recap for the episode. Number 1, and this ties to the concept of trust. Do I trust my partner's consistency and reliability? Yes or no? Number 2, can I bring up a hard topic without fearing punishment? This ties to emotional safety. Yes or no? Can you bring it up or no? Number 3, do we communicate respectfully, even during conflict? This ties to respect. Number 4 ties to reciprocity. Does effort feel relatively mutual? Yes or no? Number 5 ties to comprehension. Do I feel understood after serious conversations? Yes or no? Number 6 ties to repair. When conflict happens, do we repair and reconnect? Yes or no? Number 7, consideration. Do we both show ongoing awareness of what makes the other feel cared for and supported? Yes or no? Number 8 ties to complementarity. This question can be challenging, so I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently. More often than not, do our differences strengthen us? Yes or no? Again, that ties to complementarity. Number 9 ties to independence. Do we both have lives outside of the relationship? Yes or no? Last but certainly not least, number 10 ties to growth. Are we both willing to work on ourselves and the relationship? Yes or no? Now, in terms of scoring, I want to provide some guidelines here. If you answered no to 2 or fewer of the 10 questions, then you have a very solid and secure foundation in your current relationship. If you answered no to 3 to 4 of these questions, these are areas to work on, but this is likely still skills-based, and I'll talk about the difference in a minute. If you said no to 5 or more than half of the questions, then there are significant patterns worth addressing and examining here. So let's determine the difference here. It's important for you to ask yourself, is this a skill issue where both partners are willing to grow but haven't learned how, or a compatibility issue? The foundation isn't there because one person is unwilling to do the work. Skills or compatibility? You can't create security with someone who isn't interested in being secure. But if both people are willing, chef's kiss. Anything is possible. There you have it, folks. Trust, emotional safety, reciprocity, respect, comprehension, repair, consideration, complementarity, independence, and growth. Those are the 10 principles of secure relating. I know many of us haven't had examples of this in our lives. This is why I would highly encourage you, just like I encourage my clients to do, to find a secure example in your life. Remember, secure doesn't mean perfect. There will be messiness, there will be imperfection, there will be conflict, and occasionally there may even be breaking of some of what I talked about today. It's always about how the couple comes back together, how they learn one another over time. That makes them secure. And always remember, security isn't found, it is built. This is why working to become secure yourself is so fundamentally important for having healthier relationships. Because you can find someone secure and struggle with your own insecurity and still have a lot of this lacking because you don't know how to build it and you don't know how to accept it and/or. That said, if you haven't had this modeled for you, or you have never felt that sense of relief, being able to breathe in a relationship, being able to drop your suspicions, to soften your fears, to not give in to a sense of abandonment, to give in to goodwill and to trust. If you've struggled to do that, that is okay. It is never too late to work on being more secure. If what I shared today resonated with you, I would be honored to help you build some of these skills to grow more secure yourself. You can learn more about my coaching program and my philosophy when it comes to healing anxious attachment and growing more secure at crackliff.com/coaching. You can also set up a free consultation to speak with me there. Powerful episode today. Can't wait to share the next one.